was at a cafe the other day and I watched two men interact. There's two tables right next to each other. One table has an outlet and the other table doesn't. So this guy gets up and goes and plugs in his phone at the outlet. Guy number two comes to sit down at the table with the phone plugged in at the outlet. And the guy number one, all he does is say, "Hey bro, I'm just charging my phone." And the other guy's like, "Yeah, bro, no problem. All right, dude, we're good." I looked at that situation and thought, would a woman have gotten up and said, "I'm sorry," and taken her phone and her charger and moved back to the place? I don't know. I think we would have, like, really. And so it's interesting because a man's not apologizing for taking up space, whereas women apologize for taking up space. And you know who we apologize to more often than not? Other women. I got a text the other day and I responded and I started to say, "Sorry for the long text," or "Sorry for blowing up your phone," or "Sorry for misunderstanding you," or "Sorry for asking a question." Why is it that we feel the need to always apologize? Most of the time we think, oh, women are more emotional, we're softer, we're more polite, and that might be the reason. But there's a study done, and it's different than what you think. First, we're going to cover what the research actually shows about how often women apologize, because most people assume it's not what the data says. Then, where did this training come from? How did we become trained to over-apologize? And we're going to walk through bracing for offense. And when you do it 100 times a day, how it affects your body, how it affects your mood, your sleep, your overall well-being. And then we're going to look at some tactics that we can do instead. The apology is the evidence. The conditioning is the cause. That is where we are starting. All right, let's go through what the research actually shows. When a woman apologizes, we think it's because we're softer, we're more in tuned, we're polite, we're more emotional, we're more conditioned to understand feelings. But that is not what the research shows. Men and women actually apologize at the same rate. But what they're apologizing for is in proportion to what they have actually done wrong. Let me say that again. In proportion to what they actually have done wrong. So when you go back and you look at this, women perceive that they have done something wrong more often than a man perceives that they have done something wrong. So then we over-apologize because we're perceiving we've done something wrong. I'm not saying don't apologize when you've done something wrong. I mean, own your shit, right? But we feel the need to apologize for taking up space. We have a much lower threshold to what counts as an offense in the first place. So this is kind of funny, but do you apologize for bumping into furniture or the door or the dog? A man would never apologize for any of those things. And a woman, it's just the first thing that comes out of our mouth so often. Same apology rate, wildly different ideas of what counts as wrong. So when people say women are more apologetic, what they're really saying is we're conditioned and calibrated to make that the norm in our life. We were not born this way to just apologize for taking up space. If you think back to if you look at a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old, they're not going to apologize for being who they are. We're taught this. And who are we taught this by? Our teachers, our coaches, our parents, our siblings, the world around us. I mean, if you think of a toddler having a temper tantrum, a boy toddler versus a girl toddler, same temper tantrum. Neither one of them is apologizing for what they're doing. But then as we grow up and as we age, the boy is still going to not apologize for taking up space, whereas the girl is going to start to say, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, forgive me. Oh, excuse me, or I apologize. Why? Because we're taught, be quieter, lower your voice, don't be so loud, don't interrupt, don't be so bossy, don't make a scene. We don't behave that way at the table. Little girls don't act that way. I know that was so conditioned in my brain as I was growing up as to how I should behave, how girls act. We learned this from our parents, who learned it from their parents. So at a very young age, women already feel less than. Think about what we're doing, how we're conditioning our kids by treating them like that. I remember when my daughter was younger, and she's extremely smart and very bright, and she was in a gifted and talented program. And she didn't like to tell the boys that she was in the gifted and talented program because she didn't want them to think she was smarter than they were. She had to have learned that from me or from her surroundings. I'm happy to say that today she will showcase her wits, her smarts, and everything about her. But we have to unlearn these conditioned behaviors. So now let's think about how it impacts us physically on our body. So if we're constantly bracing for offense, if we're constantly waiting to apologize, if we're constantly thinking, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I don't want to take up space. Oh, please forgive me for this. How it does, how you posture your body. Look how you're hovering your body. Look how you're coming in. Look how you're closing yourself off. And think about how that impacts you internally, where it impacts your sleep. It impacts your mood. It impacts the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you move. And as we age and we go through perimenopause or menopause, it matters even more because our estrogen is starting to decline. So we no longer have that buffer in our nervous system. Our endocannabinoid system is starting to get out of whack, which is the master regulator of our mood, temperature, sleep, pain, inflammation. So our hormones were protecting us when we were younger. But as the estrogen starts to decline and our endocannabinoid system gets out of whack, we are no longer bracing our body for these thousands of apologies that take a toll. And it's not so much that you're saying you're sorry. It is that we are making ourselves smaller. So what do we actually do with this information? First, when you're actually wrong, apologize. Own it. Say it. Say it cleanly. Say it clearly. That's what an apology is for. Quit apologizing for, sorry for the long text. Sorry for blowing up your phone. Sorry because my grocery cart was in the middle of the aisle. Sorry because I'm standing in line at the coffee shop. sorry because I plugged my phone in a charger. So what can you do instead? Well, you could say, excuse me. And here's what I've really honed in on trying to do the best I can is not saying I'm sorry, saying excuse me or pardon me. Instead of saying, sorry, I'm late getting back to you, you could say, thank you for waiting. It's a really subtle difference, but look at the impact. Sorry, I'm late getting back to you versus thank you for waiting. It just sounds better. It feels better. It doesn't impact you as much. It might feel weird to start to change that language, and because we're so accustomed to it and it's ingrained in us, so it might feel weird at first to start to change that language. But I have found that I stop myself every time I go to say I'm sorry, and I think of a different way to structure that sentence. So after about a month of practicing this, it feels better. It makes me happier. I don't feel the need to over apologize for things that I didn't perceive that I did wrong. Because we're not wrong for taking up space. So here's some key takeaways. First of all, women and men apologize at the same rate. The threshold is what was different. What we perceive we did wrong versus what they perceive they did wrong. Second, the conditioning is what causes it. It's our parents, our grandparents, and multiple generations before that have taught us how to behave as women. And third, our body is taking count. It is adding up. And our mind, more so than anything, because when we can't sleep, when our mood is off, when we are upset or angry or frustrated, these are all things that have stacked inside of us that we don't even realize. It's years in the making. So take up the room that's yours. Not more, not less, just what is yours. So let me know in the comments, when was the last time you apologized for something when you really didn't owe anyone an apology? And if you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. We talk about this every week. The mind, the body, the conditioning, menopause, and the endocannabinoid system. I'm Lisa Williams.